Welcome to today's lecture on evaluating games. This lecture is designed for the Game Simulation and Animation Foundations course at Lake Minneola High School. Our essential question for today is, how are game evaluations used within the industry to develop new products? And the first thing we must do is review our critics. Critics are individuals who evaluate and review the key elements of a game. The goal is to provide unbiased information to the target audience, and good critics possess a strong background in gaming and programming. Critics really need to have a knowledge of new technologies, unique differences, and reverse engineering to differentiate the game from similar titles. But critics often have bias, and bias is defined as the intentional slant in one direction. You may have positive bias, which promotes a product, and typically the critic is hired by the developing company. You may also have negative bias, which slanders a product, and typically your critic is hired by the opposition. Objective critic reviews must be unbiased. It is very important to make sure if you're creating a review for a game that you stick to the facts. You don't bias, you don't slander, you don't promote. You just stick to the facts. So consumers in general must check their sources, because if you're looking at, say, the developer's website, most likely you're going to be looking at positive bias, something that's promoting the product. Whereas if you're looking at the opposition's website, they may also be going through promoting their item, but they're slandering their competitor. An objective critic review would probably be something like Consumer Reports. It's very objective, it doesn't slander, it doesn't promote. There are 10 key elements to evaluating games. The first is the quality of rules. We have to check for the player understanding of the purpose of the game as well as overcoming the obstacles. Second, we have to look at our user interface. We check for the intuitive feel and the contribution to the game immersion. Third, we look at the navigation. This checks for the player movement, the respawn points, and also obstacle spawning in the game world. Fourth, we look at the performance. We check for glitches, graphic movements, and any other delays that may occur during gameplay. Fifth, we look at gameplay. We check specifically for the player's immersion and experience during the gameplay. Sixth, we look at the artistry. We check for the visual appeal during the game. Does it look good? Are there things that could be improved? Seventh, we look at the longevity. We check the future market analysis for the genre, style of the game. And what we're really looking for is, will the game be around for quite a while? Does it have good replay value in terms of maybe creating a sequel, so on and so forth? Eighth, we look at the player interactions. We check for the player's abilities and interactions with game objects and other characters. Ninth, we look at the plot. We have to check for the strength of the backstory and the plot development as related to the immersion. If it's contributing to the immersion, then typically you have pretty decent plot development. You have also a pretty strong backstory. Finally, we check for reward. We check for a balance in the player risk and player reward, as well as unique qualities of the reward. For example, if you have a room full of enemies, and the player must run in and destroy the enemies to obtain a very rare and unique weapon, then that player is probably going to go into the risk and say, okay, if I destroy these enemies, I get this rare, unique sword. However, if there's a room full of enemies, and the player runs in, destroys the enemies, and all they get is a piece of candy, then you're not having a good balance between risk and reward. So when we're reviewing the game, what we must do is look at the 10 elements. After evaluating a game, critics have to inform the audience via a written review. You may also see a video review, as this is becoming more common. Critics take notes throughout the evaluation process to assist with outlining the pros and the cons. They describe the gameplay, the performance, the user interface, navigation, the artificial intelligence, inventory systems, etc., etc. They outline the plot without giving away any spoilers. That is very important. When you're writing a game review, you don't want to let your audience know what the ending is or the plot twists. You just want to kind of give them a lead in and say it's a really cool game or it's not very good. Longer reviews also discuss the developer. Typically, you're looking at the game history, maybe the company, and also the game designers involved with the game development. It is important to note that almost all newer games are reverse engineered from older games. So when critics are reviewing these games, they may compare to previous games. They may also look at different elements here and there. But reverse engineering is used quite often in the overall market. So what is reverse engineering? Well, it is defined as the process of deconstructing an existing product to understand how it works. Critic reviews typically provide an outline of the good and bad elements of a product, so this really assists with developers going through and looking at a game and saying what's good, what's bad. In the game industry, what we typically do is we take the good elements from an existing game, we combine it with original content to create a brand new game, but we must be very careful to avoid copyright infringement, as this is an illegal act. At this point, check your understanding of the material. If you feel you have the material, excellent. If you feel you need to review again, please do so. And if you have any questions, please contact your instructor.